Welcome to the next in our series of short video interviews where I ask what's next post COVID-19. Very much looking at the better future now, back to the better, but we're just going to touch today on a few other kind of areas as well that impacted today our guest, who is Becky Woodmansee, who is the People Director at Premier Inn Restaurants UK. So hi Becky, good morning.
Hi Peter, nice to be here.
You're very welcome. Becky, if you could just give us a little overview of your sort of role with Premier Inn, your sort of overall responsibilities, and a little bit some facts, I guess, about Premier Inn as well. That'd be great.
Yeah, of course. So Premier Inn is owned by Whitbread. Premier Inn has 800 hotels in the UK, and we also have a restaurants division. The restaurants division has over 400 restaurants. So we're the largest hotel operator in the UK by quite some margin, actually, and the best loved budget hotel brand, again, by quite some margin, which is wonderful for us. And our restaurant chains they're typically co-located near the hotel, and they are brands like Beefeater, Brewers Fayre. So the idea is that basically we serve the local community in which the restaurant is based, but also it's a great opportunity because our Premier Inn guests can kind of rest easy, know that they can get a lovely breakfast and a nice dinner when they stay in our hotels as well. So the two work very closely together, which is why my role is across both. And in a nutshell, what's my job about? Well, we have 30,000 employees in the UK, 1,200 sites in total. And my job's all around about making sure we've got great managers, a full, diverse and skilled team sheet, and that we've got a really efficient people operation, because it is important that we're constantly thinking about how much we can put value back to our guests as much as we can. And also, really the most important thing of all is creating a great culture so that we can sort of retain and grow our teams.
Wonderful. Thanks, Becky. OK, so let's kind of let's kick off with this first one then, which is obviously after the year everyone's kind of experienced, which is completely crazy, really, isn't it? So let's have a little look at the kind of, obviously in the hospitality industry, the huge impact that COVID's had, you know, in your more so than many, I think. So just give us a flavour, I guess, of what that's been like.
Yes, I mean, how do you summarise it in a few words? What a year it's been for everybody, actually, across so many different sectors. But for us, it was very far-reaching in its impact. So it disrupted our operations. So overnight, literally, we had to close due to government guidelines. We had to close all of our hotel and restaurants at first, actually. So it was a huge job in its own right, just closing everything down. Many of our hotels, because hotels are a 365-day-a-year operation and 24/7, many of them have never been closed. So literally sort of the basics of sort of physically and logistically, how do you get everything kind of closed down? But we got through that phase. And really then this last year has been about doing the right thing to protect our teams, looking after our guests who were eventually able to stay with us in certain sort of categories for business travel, for example, thinking about how we could protect the interests of our shareholders, and also what we could do to help the communities in which we operate. So, you know, it's been a year with lots of different things going on. We had 40 of our hotels open for key workers throughout the pandemic, actually, so supporting the National Health Service and key workers, particularly near some of the largest hotels in the hospitals, in the country. We donated 158 tonnes of food to food banks. So we've done a lot of different things to try and sort of respond in a really responsible way. But yes, it's been quite a year.
Yeah. And so let's look at that then. Yeah, I think at the time when I thought about hotels, I just thought they'd all be closed. I don't know why I thought that, but it absolutely makes sense about key workers. So that obviously had a huge impact in terms of you managing that process, keeping your employees safe, your guests safe. So talk us a little bit about you know, what you had to go through to make it COVID safe, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's been different phases through the last year, but if I take a sort of right back briefly to the start of the pandemic, you know, the first thing that we needed to do was what was right in the national effort, and that is why we sort of volunteered, as it were, to keep some of our hotels open, and clearly from a team member point of view, we needed to go about doing that in a really careful and responsible way. So I spent an awful lot of time actually with Managing Director for Premier Inn, who I obviously work very closely with, listening to directly what were some of the sort of concerns that our hotels that we were thinking about keeping open, what was on people's minds, and it was all about safety. So we set up a weekly forum with representatives from each of the hotels. We came together with them directly. We had, all of the right people to help make sure we could get the right PPE, all on the call together. So very much a sort of team effort, but listening very directly to the frontline teams. The one thing that we did do, which I think worked very well for us in those very early stages, was we actually staffed the hotel through volunteers. Now our team members were paid. In fact, we actually paid a premium to anybody who did want to work, but it was very much a volunteer approach, so that we were responding where people wanted to do something in the national effort. This was something that people could do to help. And many of our team members and our hotel managers felt quite strongly that they did want to be there and do something in the national effort, but clearly making sure that we had all the protective equipment that was needed. We were following all of the government guidelines. And in those very early days, the government guidelines were quite limited actually in terms of what we could do. So sourcing as much information as we could, and just constant dialogue really. So that's what we did sort of the early days, but then it very much evolved as the year went on. So, by the summer, almost all of our hotels were open because, again, the government wanted a sort of national infrastructure because we needed to make sure that people could move around the UK for business purposes. So, keeping BT Open Reach engineers able to get out and keep the national, internet network going, for example. These are all sort of key things. So again, sort of extending out that approach that we'd taken right at the beginning around listening and making sure that we were just applying that, but just on a much larger scale. And also listening to our restaurant teams who were having a very different experience because the restaurants were shut for a lot longer, and then had a really bumper period through the Eat Out to help out in the summer, but getting people ready to go from being largely at home on furlough, then returning to work in quite an intense way with a really hectic summer. And then after that, sadly, because of the pandemic continuing, then, the government restrictions, meaning we needed to close the restaurants back down again for quite a long period of time. So keeping the communication going with our team members has been absolutely critical throughout.
So yeah, I mean the volunteer piece is interesting, isn't it? And that kind of makes perfect sense. It's really good. And I know we touched on it quickly about because obviously furlough. You've obviously had a huge amount of staff furloughed, and so I mean, how is and the complexity in that in terms of payroll and that sort of thing. So I'm going to share a little bit about furlough, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure many people that read HRD magazine will have their own stories of the joys of working with the scheme. I mean, from our perspective, I mean, the first thing to say is we were enormously pleased and really welcomed the fact that the furlough scheme, and actually we have a Germany hotel operation in Kurzarbeit, which is the equivalent in Germany, we really welcome because it's really helped us to support employees, when we've had no revenue for such an extended period of time. It has been critical to our ability to sort of continue to retain team and make sure that people were paid. We actually have had, at the height of everything, we had around about 27,000 people that we were utilising the furlough scheme for. Our team members really welcomed that, understood why it was needed, and have been very responsive as the scheme has changed over time. But clearly that has come with its own complexities, particularly in terms of with a variable paid, hourly paid workforce. You know, there's the odd bit in the scheme rules that's quite tricky for the hospitality industry, but I think largely we've all got through that, and we've all sort of welcomed it. You know, for us, really, the focus quite quickly became not just on the sort of scheme itself and how to best kind of administer that and consent and make sure we had all of that in place, but really, how were we going to keep a sort of relationship with our workforce through this very protracted period where people were away from the workplace, very mindful of mental health and well-being through this time, and I'm sure we can sort of come on to talk a little bit more about that in due course. But yeah, it's been a tricky scheme to work with, but I think we've largely got there. Now, mostly we've got people on flexible furlough. That's because our business is largely sort of just about to sort of do the final part of reopening as we get indoor dining, hopefully going in about a week's time. And that will continue to really support us, that flexible furlough, to top up. The other thing that we did do, which is probably worthy of mention, is we took a decision for about 5 months, for about the first 5 months, we actually topped everyone up to full pay. And the intent there was very much to signal that we would do as much as we could for as long as we could. And we kept a lot of dialogue going so people understood why we were doing that we couldn't promise to do it forever, but that we would do it to show that we cared, that we understood the disruption that was going on in everyone's lives, and ultimately we did need to move closer to the sort of standard scheme rules as the pandemic kind of carried on, but we're very proud of the fact that we were able to do that for a period of time for our teams.
Yeah, I mean that whole point of, as you say, for people out of the business for so long on furlough and then keeping that communication moving and then obviously bringing them back on board now, so it's such a challenge. You know, we've never dealt with this sort of thing before, have we? So how does this sort of impact that going forward then, just on, I guess, employee numbers and how are you managing this? And because obviously it's all about doing what's right and caring and empathy, which is what you've just said there. So what are those plans looking like as you bring people back?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's literally where we're at now, and what a lovely point to be at, you know, after such a disrupted year. So for us, sort of two slightly different, probably three populations I would describe it as. So you've got the hotels that have been largely, by and large, they have been open, but with limited trade because leisure guests are not able, it's against the law to stay for leisure in a hotel at the moment until the 17th of May, hopefully when that restriction will change. So for the hotel population, that's sort of one group that we've had to think carefully about, and I'll talk about that in a minute. For our restaurant teams, other than Eat Out to help out in that period over the summer where restaurants were open, restaurants have been closed for most of the last 12 months, and therefore that's a very different return to work journey, and we've had to think very specifically about the right way to go about doing that. And then finally, our support centre, who have largely been like you and I are now. They've been working. We have had people furloughed in our support centre, but those that have been working, they've been working remotely, and we used to be very office-based, and we're classic hospitality, highly relational business. So taking those kind of three different groups, they've had three different return to work kind of journeys. So I'll talk about the restaurant and hotel operations first. So with both of those areas of the business, it's been all about getting people ready and understanding through a lot of listening activity what was on people's minds, what were people worried about. So there's definitely concerns about health and safety. So throughout the last year, we've had health and safety forums running so that we could listen to what the concerns were. And as an example, when we reopened the hotels in full, we had representatives from every single hotel who would gather the concerns and there's feedback and the ideas that people had about how to keep guests and teams safe in the hotels, and then that was fed up into divisional and then ultimately a national forum which I sat on. So we've always had, throughout the last year, we've really had this focus on sort of keeping close, keeping the communication lines really open, making sure we understood what the concerns would be so that we could really well respond to those concerns. And then at the moment, we've got a thing running called Spring into Action, which is all about getting our restaurant and our hotel teams kind of back up to full speed, and a bit of a pun, given that we're in the spring as we do this kind of return, and that's all about health and well-being. So, you know, to take a restaurant's example, where we've now got outdoor dining going, our team members are doing about 30,000 steps a day when they return to work. So that's a huge amount of steps to do if you've been at home on furlough, maybe a little bit less active. So we've had lots of basically fun things running, which we've all got involved in. We've been raising some money for Great Ormond Street by having a round the world challenge where we all got a little bit fit and healthy, and raised some money by sort of setting ourselves personal challenges about how many steps we could do. We've had lots of advice and guidance and social media sort of opportunities for people to post what they're doing to get ready for coming back to work and getting kind of fit for the future. And that's really, our team members responded brilliantly to that. I really enjoyed kind of getting stuck back into work, and it's really helped kind of smooth that transition for people. But I wouldn't want to, in saying that, say that there aren't also, you know, very real concerns people have about coming back to work after such a long break. And so we've also really invested in mental health first aiders and making sure we've got enough people around our business that people can turn to if they're not feeling okay. We have got return to work wellbeing welcome backs for all of our team members, so they can talk to their line manager about what's worrying them, what's on their mind, so that we're very well aware of that. So I can't do it justice in a few minutes, but a lot of focus on welcoming everybody back, but doing it in the right way based on what individuals' concerns might be.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we were talking about health and well-being because we were going to sort of drill into that, because I think there's this whole point of, yeah, absolutely welcome people back to work and what's gone on previously, but now there's this sense of this kind of, you know, some people saying a crisis, health and well-being, mental health crisis, where, you know, all the kind of things that haven't happened to kind of, you know, lack of treatment for kind of certain things. So I guess what's your strategy for that and your plans going forward for long, you know, forward thinking mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do see it as sort of well-being holistically, of you know, which helps mental health.
Yeah.
So we do tend to look at it, you know, in terms of spiritual, emotional, physical well-being, you know, financial well-being. So we've taken quite a sort of holistic approach, really, to thinking about well-being, but just to sort of bring it to life, if it's helpful, with a few of the sort of specific things that we've you know, we've put in place. So we've really looked at, so if I take financial well-being as an example, we're very well aware that although we did things like top up the furlough grant to full pay for a period of time, household incomes have been very disrupted throughout the UK, and we're very, very well aware of that. So we've got some programs launching which are all about financial well-being and education, so that our team members can access information and sources of good guidance on how to manage your finances if your finances have got a little bit tricky as you've managed through that pandemic period of time, where we know, as I say, that household incomes have been very disrupted through this period of time. We've also done some things in addition to obviously what we do to bolster our own team's pay by, you know, we had to bring our hours down, sadly, because of the sort of revenue disruption that we'd had. But we've really looked at how we can do that in a way that builds back hours as soon as the revenue does start to kind of grow again for people. But noting that, you know, clearly there is that disruption to income levels at the moment, we've also looked at how we can make charitable donations. So we made a charitable donation to one of our partner charity organisations, so that within the hospitality industry, people can access welfare grants if they, you know, have got some sort of financial hardship at the moment. So we've done sort of practical things like that to sort of help make sure that those that have got very specific needs can sort of be very well supported, not just in Whitbread but across the industry, because we're very well aware that we're a large player in a very, very impacted industry. So we're sort of trying to, you know, play our part in that regard as well. But well-being does have all these different factors to it, and mental health specifically I do agree with you, Peter. I think is going to be something that we will see as a, an ongoing theme of the workplace. It was pre-pandemic, and that, that is just going to continue to need to be a focus of organisations. So we're trying to equip our line managers, who really are the sort of, often the first emergency responder, when somebody is in crisis or has a long-term condition that they're managing. Access to mental health first aiders, as I say, and a lot of self-help. We have a thing called Wellbeing Wednesday, which is a portal and a hub and a set of activities that it's not just about Wednesdays, but we have a weekly focus where we try and make sure that we are really regularly walking the talk in terms of why well-being is important, that it's okay not to be okay. So, I'm very conscious when I'm on, Skypes or, team meetings and Zooms and things to, always be very honest about, what's going well and maybe not what's not going so well as well, so that everybody understands you don't have to be bulletproof, and it's okay to say if you're not. And doing lots and lots of fun activities and fun things to sort of keep our spirits up through this very tricky year that we've all just lived through. And our teams have really gone with that and really come up with loads of really creative and inventive different ideas. We've had online yoga classes, we've had all sorts of different things, and we've also really pushed for our benefits providers as well to respond by putting in place things that we knew would be useful to our teams. So lots more online things, whereas we would have had, for example, gym memberships in the past. We've had our benefits providers, we asked them to put lots more online content on so that people could go online and they could participate in an exercise class, for example. We had lots of people homeschooling their kids, so we made sure there was lots of information through our benefits providers about how to do that well, how to manage, your own feelings of kind of stress as you're trying to manage homeschooling alongside doing your job, etc. So just being as creative as we could be. I'm not saying for 1 minute we got everything right, though. It just feels like, you can almost never do enough in this space, but we're trying to do what we can.
Yeah, I think your point about financial wellbeing is quite an interesting one as well, because it's one of those things that's been difficult to get people to open up about and be honest about. And actually, the pandemic, to some degree, lots of things have accelerated, haven't they? And I think that's another part which is really important. When you're responsible for paying people's salaries at the end of the day, helping them sometimes and getting them to be more open is really useful for both parties. So, and I think your point equally is about the business, isn't it? All this has got to be about the business and the employees and working together, because if the income's not there, you have to, and you're being very straight and upfront, and I think that's the right way forward. Good. Okay. So let's talk about again this great time at the moment where you're kind of building back this kind of building back better, as a lot of people kind of talk about, which I quite like. Some companies I talk to obviously are very, they've got a lot of staff in office space. Well, obviously you've got people who are working all the time, then you've got your support staff. So technology has played a part in all this, but I guess what from I guess the learning, and actually what do your employees, you feel from listening to them, what do they want to kind of keep as they return back to work, and how's that shaping up? Because I think there has been some really good learning from this process.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no doubt it's accelerated a trend that was coming to us all anyway. The expectations around where, how and when I work, they were all shifting pre-pandemic, and all this has done, I think, is really accelerated that and proven once and for all the art of the possible. So what are we hearing? I mean, you have to bear in mind we are a hospitality business, so human connection is what we are all about, and we do have the vast majority of our workforce are serving the customer directly day in, day out in a hotel or a restaurant, and therefore we've needed to be very mindful that we do need to all be in this together, And we need to be mindful that whilst we are following the government guidelines, which is work from home if you are able, we do have a large workforce who will always need to be at a physical premises doing a job where you're physically in service of a customer directly, you know, not remotely through technology. So we've really tried to keep that in mind as we've developed out our solutions. That said, for our support centre, we've, in the same way we did for our frontline teams, we've done a lot of listening activity. And what's really, really clear is that it's a very mixed picture. So everybody's saying there are some real positives about remote working and they would like to keep the best of those positives. So I do expect that we will follow probably the trend that's out there very much around hybrid working, to enable people to keep that positive side of remote working, you know, and being able to, you know, dash and put your laundry on or drop your kids off without your commute to work, all those things that have actually been the positive that's come out of this very, very negative global pandemic, we do want to hang on to. But we have been really well aware for quite a long time actually that not everybody's home environment is suitable for them to work easily, and actually we discovered that quite early on. We started to have some of our younger support centre employees who perhaps were not, you know, set up in a sort of family home setting where they could easily kind of come into a study or sit at a dining table, or they were in multiple occupancy living. You know, they were finding it quite tricky. And so we have kept our office open for people who needed, for health and wellbeing reasons, to be in a different environment. And we kept the office open right the way through for that reason. Very small number of people that have taken that up, but for some it was really, really important to do that. So we're very well aware that it's not right to just send everybody to kind of, you know, remote working forever and never see each other again, particularly as a hospitality business where our frontline operation we do need to regularly connect with. So how we're looking at doing things, we've got an employee forum. We're working very closely with our employee forum. We're using that as one of our main sort of listening vehicles. We've surveyed employees as well to say, what do you think would be the right sort of balance here and how do we get this right? But we have had some areas of our support centre that have worked throughout. So our contact centre, for example, has been open for customer contacts through quite a lot of the last year. So we've already got quite a lot of learnings in terms of what's really important. So safety was the number one thing. People wanted to feel well inducted. So we've got a whole online induction to help people when they come back. We've set everybody sort of a bit of a challenge to say, have a wellbeing goal this year. So something that you set with your manager, which is about your wellbeing, your health as you return to the office and return to work, so that people can kind of really be focusing and thinking on what is it that's going to make me feel comfortable and what's going to be the kind of right balance for me. So our office space, I'm sure, will become somewhere that we'll go to regularly, probably for collaboration. We're just trying to work through at the moment, how do you need everybody in if you're having a meeting which is about collaboration, or can you do that still remotely? We've tried a few different versions of it, and it can feel like you're a bit left out if you're online and everybody else is in the meeting room. So we're going to need to think quite carefully about some principles of what will good practice look like in terms of hybrid working, but that's broadly the direction we're going in. And in jobs like mine, actually, it's made me think about, why was I in the office so much? You know, I should really be out in our operation most of the time, or working for efficiency and productivity reasons, probably in, you know, remotely like you and I are doing this morning. So it'll probably change the balance of how we spend our time a bit, I suspect, but definitely for us, collaboration, connection, you know, being a hospitality business means we'll probably still have that hub where people can come together, because that is what our frontline teams have to do. So why would it be any different in our support centre?
Yeah. No, I think I mean there's so much. It's a similar sort of theme I hear, and this whole point of taking the good things that work well for employees and equally for the business, and it's kind of molding those two together. I think the trick, and you're right about remote virtual meetings versus, I mean, it's a different dynamic. In one way, virtual have allowed people to have a voice where they wouldn't, and vice versa. So mixing the two, and there's lots of ideas, and it's just trial and error, isn't it? I think you're right. We're all trying different things to see what will work, best for the business and the employees.
Definitely, and I'm very fortunate in that I'm able to spend time in forums listening to people from very different industries. So not every industry has been anywhere near as disrupted as mine has. So we're stealing with pride. We're taking all those learnings from many sectors and many industries and businesses that have been far less disrupted and that are sort of further ahead on this journey, and just trying to think about what they're saying and what their experience has been, and then translate it back into, okay, so what would that mean in our company? What would work well with our culture, with our EVP, with the kind of employer we want to be? And that's kind of been quite critical for us, I think.
I mean, it's exactly why I do these. I think, it's important that we hear as many voices and many experiences as we go through this, so that we can find out the best route for your individual, organisation. And I think the other trick, I think, well, the other tricky part at the moment, I think we're finding, and you may find this, but you're setting your boundaries up, and because policies and procedures and kind of what's equitable and fair, when we're talking about hybrid, and so there's all those kind of little nuances that organizations need to get right. So there is a set of rules ultimately.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's sort of principles are very important, because you have to have something that you're sort of anchoring everything back to for consistency, because people tend to not like things if they feel that there's an injustice or a sort of something doesn't feel logical. So you have to have some principles that you sort of decide upon, but I don't think you can decide upon those through a sort of hierarchical approach. I think you have to sort of say, well, we think this is broadly what's right for our organisation. Now let's talk about it. Let's kind of get a range of different perspectives. So we have for diversity and inclusion, for example, different forums that meet to around race, religion and culture, or around gender, or around disability. So we're also using those forums, and we're saying, right, okay, let's just forget about the reason why we're in this situation. How do we want to work, and what do we think will work, and let's take into consideration the widest group of different viewpoints on this to make sure we don't miss anything obvious as we sort of come up with the right solutions for us. And we also need to think about the competition, right? Because we're all in competition for talent, so we also then have to think about, well, how, if we offered this, how would that then compare to what, I don't know, a finance professional, for example, might be able to get in different sectors, because those skills are very transferable. And similarly with the frontline teams, we're always thinking about what is our offer, and is that competitive, and is and where do our employees have choices, and how do we make sure that we're always a good choice? Yeah,
no, I think absolutely, hospitality is one of those industries that I know you're keen to kind of really put out there as a great platform, isn't it? Just for new people coming through, and skills learning and transferable skills. So I mean, let's move on to quickly then, because I know that I understand. So Samuel Whitbread, who basically is your founder, and so employed apprentices back in 1742. We're a great supporter of apprenticeships. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, your scheme and how important you think it is to the hospitality industry. So yeah, just let's have a listen to that.
Yeah, definitely. Very happy to, very proud to, actually. So yeah, you're right. Our founder back in 1742 was indeed an apprentice, and we definitely have that within the DNA of the organisation. So we are a place where there are no barriers to entry. This is the great thing about the hospitality industry. There's no barriers to entry, really. Anyone can join, and there's no limits to where you can take your career either. And so that is quite a unique and special platform. We have got this long history of apprenticeships. I mean, now we think of it as the sort of modern government scheme, but in one way, shape or form, we've always been a place that you could join and you could develop your career. So we're known, and we're very proud to be known for our learning and development offering, not just for apprentices, but wherever you join us from and wherever you'd like to go, we'd like to think we can sort of help you get there. And we've got people within our business in senior leadership positions who have indeed started, washing the dishes in a restaurant. Might not necessarily be in a Whitbread restaurant, but it really is an industry where you can grow from right from the sort of the entry level roles right the way up. We actually, through the pandemic, actually kept our apprenticeships going. So very proud of the fact that 95% of our learners stayed in learning and continued their apprenticeship. Now, we didn't know this at the time because we were just kind of getting on with what we felt was right for our culture, but it turns out actually that sadly a lot of apprentices had their apprenticeships paused or stopped. And that's not just in the hospitality sector, that's kind of throughout. It was a sort of a consequence of the pandemic, but we did keep it going. And so we're very proud of the fact that 95% of our learners continued their journey. And we've actually just won an award, which is lovely to get a bit of external recognition as the #1 apprenticeship provider rated by apprentices themselves. So by Rate My Apprenticeship, they're #1 provider within the hospitality industry, which is a lovely piece of external recognition, but it's all born out of this very long-standing commitment to learning and being a place where you can grow, and so we sort of stayed true to our values and what we kind of stand for as an organisation, I think, through the pandemic, and would like to think that would stand us in good stead now as we come out the other side.
Yeah, no, I think this whole period of people being furloughed, or there's a time of reflection has gone on, I think, isn't it? So I think it's that some of the work you've done there, I think, for people sort of starting careers or changing careers, it's just it's a strong platform. It's a great talent platform I think you've got there. So yeah, excellent. Okay, and then I guess I think there's a kind of one of my interviews, there was a kind of a point about the organisation emerge out of this crisis, let's call it. The best would be those who sort of focus on purpose, identity and culture. So I guess that's something, talking to you so far, I get that you completely agree with. So I just give us your flavour of that and kind of what sort of that, because there's a sustainability piece. I think there's a lot of purpose going on, great purpose, and looking after local communities, etc. Some really nice things happening post COVID. I really do think so.
Yeah, I do agree with what one of your previous interviewees has said, and your sort of flavour of things. I think that organisations are going to fall into a couple of camps, certainly in the minds of investors and in the minds of consumers. And we did what we did through the last year because we were being true to ourselves. I mean, I've said, I was chatting to somebody actually the other week, and I think it's probably the most purposeful year of my entire working life, actually, because it was just such an important mission, and it felt so important to get it as right as we could in the most impossible circumstances. And really, the only thing that you can fall back on in those circumstances is, well, what is our culture? What do we stand for around here? And we've had lots of different words for it over Whitbread's history, but there is a bit of a DNA that runs through the culture of the business. I mean, now we describe it as our employee value proposition, which we've had for the last few years, which we call We Make It Together. And that's got 4 aspects to it. It's got an aspect which is about care and feel cared for. It's got an aspect which is about setting people up for success. It's about being your best and growing. And then it's about feeling proud. And actually, when I look back on the last year, please do not get me wrong. You know, there are many things that we didn't get right and we had to course correct along the way. But actually, I think that really helped us. That sort of those 4 pillars to constantly think about, how are we showing we care? Because we do. So how can we demonstrate that we care? And how can we give people the opportunity to show they care for each other? Because that was, you know, we're very relational, sort of team-based business. The team is what matters, not the individual really so much. So we needed to kind of get that right and give those opportunities. Setting people up for success was all about setting people up to be safe, making sure that people felt confident and comfortable with the work that we needed people to do, you know, and so on and so forth. And you know, so we've used those dimensions, but you're right, we were able to do that probably because of a very long heritage. And, you know, it was the same with our customers. We refunded, you know, to our customers in a heartbeat because it was the right thing to do in the circumstances. There will be businesses out there that chose not to do that, and we'll have to see in the long run what consumers make of all these decisions that different businesses have made. Yes, we absolutely tried to do our part in the community and be a force for good where we could in you know, the circumstances we were in, helping the national effort with the key worker hotels, donating food to food banks, etc., etc. But yeah, you know, we're kind of, the output of all of that is, I think, we do feel collectively a sense of pride in what we did in very difficult circumstances, and we're just super excited that now it looks like that's all kind of getting to be behind us and we can all move forward and get back to what we really love doing, which is serving our guests and welcoming people to stay in our hotels.
Yeah, and just to finish off then, Becky, so totally agree, concur with all of that, absolutely. So just for you personally, and you touched on it then actually, in the most personal year of my life, I love that, you know, because yeah, I can see that, and I think maybe it's most exciting time, I think. But in yours, I guess, just how has it been for you for, you know, this last 12 months, which has obviously been tough at times? How have you personally found it?
Oh goodness, what a question. I think it's quite hard for any of us right now to try and put into words the last year, if we work in HR or in any walk of life really. You know, I think for me, yes, it was an incredibly purposeful year. It was a year where you know, the mission was all about people. So clearly, as a people director in a large organisation, I felt highly responsible and highly accountable for getting that right. It had absolute highs and lows. So there were, at January, you know, keeping it real for a minute in terms of me living my own speech in terms of mental health and well-being. January was a really tough month. So coming out of a year where it had been so intense, and then we get that you know, national lockdown in a very grey, gloomy, and you have to keep going as a leader and keep sort of keep your head up. You know, that was tough. But we got through it, and you know, here we are, the spring is here, the sun is shining, and I think it's just restored my faith in what I believe in and what I went into HR for in the first place, which is people want to do their best. They want to come together for a sort of collective mission, and what greater opportunity have any of us had to sort of rise to the challenge than we have had in the last 12 months and really do the right thing for our employees. So, you know, that's how I would reflect on the last year.
I can add nothing to that. That's very well said. Becky, thank you so much for your time today. It's been interesting. You know, hospitality, I know, is such a tough time, and it's really good to hear your story. It really is. And like you, I'm so buoyed that you're, you know, yes, you know, indoor, because it's been a bit cold in outdoor eating, isn't it? You know, and you know, I'm sure that's going to go extremely well, and great for you and everyone at Premier Inn. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Join us again when we talk to another senior HR or people leader nowadays, I think. So as we look to see building back better. So thanks, Becky.